Today on the Rise of the Challenge podcast.
Well, scheduling, this is something I've struggled with a lot, but scheduling things properly and every morning setting about what you need to do for the day, in order preferably, and then in any moment that you're allowed a little bit of a break to engage in activities that rejuvenate you. You know, they can be something that's.
Welcome to the Rise to the Challenge podcast. Joined today, he's a singer, songwriter, actor, storyteller. It's Oliver Pigott. How are you doing today, Oliver?
Doing great. How are you? It's wonderful to be here.
Doing so good. We are so excited to have you on the show to talk about your rise to the challenge. What we like to do with all of our guests is go right to the beginning. Talk about where you're from and what you like doing growing up.
Well, I'm from Toronto originally. I was born there, and my dad passed away when I was 8, and we, as a result of that, subsequently ended up moving to Portugal. So I grew up in the south of Portugal and Toronto.
What was it like living in Portugal growing up?
It was a little bit of a culture shock at first, but and you're quite a bit to get used to. But it was my first foray into music. We were very much in a hippie culture down there. There were a lot of expatriates. We used to hang out in a place called the Valley, me and my mom and brother and sister, and that was full of a lot of expatriates who built their own houses and you know, were self-sufficient on the land. So a very interesting, colorful place to grow up.
You talked about that was your first interaction with music, or the type of music that you found in Portugal. What was interesting about it that maybe people didn't now are listening that don't know about that type of music?
Well, my interest was actually in the blues. Funny enough, being in Portugal, you know, it could have been into fado, which is a great style of music. But I had inherited my dad's blues collection. He was a blues harmonica player, and his albums and his harmonicas. So I started out before I even started singing, which is my first passion now. I started playing harmonica, and I would learn all the harmonica parts to an album called, which I now realize is very symbolic, but it was an album called Fathers and Sons by Muddy Waters. And so I fell in love with the blues, and I absorbed everything I could, all the way back to Lead Belly. And that formed the foundation of what I think I carry with me to this day. But the other thing that happened when I was in Portugal was that because we were in a fishing village that had a lot of tourists in the summer months, they would have a lot of karaoke bars. And, you know, it being Europe, kids were pretty much allowed to roam free in bars. So, my sister would fall asleep a lot at the bar. Actually, she was a lot younger than me. But my brother and I would get up and do karaoke. And so I remember feeling that rush of exhilaration that made me realize that was definitely what I wanted to pursue in my life.
With kids just roaming around into those bars, did it feel awkward being the young person in there? Or once you got up on stage or started singing, it was like, I'm one of them?
Well, yes, I learned at a young age that drunks are very boring. But you know, older people drinking also made for a great audience, and they loved that kids were getting up and doing stuff, you know. And I think I started out, my first song was Wild Thing. That was my party song. My brother did a Huey Lewis tune. I think he did Harder Rock and Roll. He got up and do that. So we each had our song. And it was a great time.
Was it always the main goal was to follow that passion with music? Or even as you're growing up, did you find other areas that piqued your interest?
Well, I surfed down there as a kid, and I got pretty good at that. That being said, I don't feel like I ever need to do that again. So it was a passing fancy, and I enjoyed nature out there, going for hikes and everything. But sports always kind of left me cold. I learned to play soccer a little bit because that's what people did out there. But it's really only ever been I was a mathematician, actually, a young mathematician.
Okay.
I had my favorite teacher, really, of all time, still, I think, was this guy, Mr. Tharma, and he was from Sri Lanka. And over there, you're a little ahead. They did these, you'd be doing trigonometry at 11 and stuff. Wow. And so I fell in love. I loved the way he taught, and I fell in love with math. But even there, I came to realize later that it's because music is so mathematical, and I they really tie in. So I think that was also musically related.
See, I was a math guy growing up, but I never
Right.
realized it connected into music because I was in band, but I never thought about the two mixing. But as you now say, it's like, okay, I can see it. And
Yeah.
and it just goes together because that is the time to really find that passion for music, playing those instruments, really trying to
Yes.
get the feel because it's like the skills that you learn when you're playing music really help you as you get older and kind of different avenues outside of music.
Yep, absolutely. I've taught quite a few kids. I teach music and vocals and guitar, and I love those moments, those eureka moments when you see a kid, and adults too have these moments too, where they suddenly realize where the joy comes from in the craft, and
Yeah.
it's really nice to see.
As you're getting older, what was that dream job that you were wanting?
I love living artistically, so any dream job involves some kind of performance. I love
Mhm.
the amalgamation of theater and music. So anything in the theatrical and musical world has always drawn me, but it morphs. So it's an interesting question because my passions change depending on what draws me artistically, what projects
Okay.
me in. And so, in those moments, I go, when I grow up, I want to do that.
Do you feel that found the creative side in you? Like you talk about being that artistic side, but did it
Hmm.
also bring out a creative side?
What exactly?
Like your creativeness came later after you really were finding those interests. So you talked about you wanted to go do this, but you
Yeah.
went and did that. Did it
Yeah.
ever bring new skills out of you?
Oh, yes, yes. Yeah. A major turning point in my artistic life was when I met my wife Danka, because she was in the theater world and a very skilled, wonderful actress. And up until that point, I was creative all the time. I'd done a lot of work with my brother, and I was on Idol, and I did all these sort of interesting things, but I'd never explored the physical aspects of being an artist. And I was very tense in parts of my body, and didn't even really realize it. It's funny to look back on some of the footage from Idol and stuff, and just see how truly uptight I was. And so that was a eureka moment for me, because she brought me into the theater world. We did a few theatrical pieces together, and I was able to marry the physical form of expression with the musical form of expression, and it really opened me up as an artist. It opened me up vocally as well, and I felt a lot of growth at that time.
You talked about Idol and talk about that experience because that's a huge honor to be a part of during that time. Because you look at it all over the world, they have their own variation of it. And it
Yes.
really is a dream for a lot of musicians to get onto that stage and perform.
It was a very interesting experience. It was fun at times, and it was also extremely stressful. And I learned a lot from my brother at that time, because we were the first siblings to be on any Idol show
Mhm.
together, competing as competitors. And I saw that he realized, being an actor and having done film and television, he realized what a visual medium it was. And I never clocked that until afterwards. But he would have meetings with the production people. You have a lot of creative freedom on that show. I don't think a lot of people realize that, but you can take a lot of liberties with those covers. And he really embraced it as a visual medium. He did better than me. He made it to the top 10. I was like top 16 or something. And I got a lot out of observing him and learning how he worked with the camera. So that was the major takeaway for me with that. But I think really it was one of my first experiences really dealing with the media and dealing with the public reaction to what I was doing,
Mhm.
which went both ways.
Yeah.
Whether it was about my performance or my appearance or whatever it might be, but I grew a very thick skin on that show.
I feel like anytime you're on like a TV show like that, you're gonna have people that are either gonna like you or hate you. And you could be the nicest person. People are gonna find negative things, and
Yes.
that's such a problem. When,
and read into things sometimes that aren't there or whatever.
yeah, what
Narrative.
year was that you were on?
I actually closed out that show in Canada, so I shut them down. It was 2008. It was season 6 was the last season of Canadian Idol.
But think about that time where social media wasn't big. And then if you were on it now, how it's totally different. Do you
Oh
think
my
it was
goodness.
better that at the time you were on it, it was perfect than where it is now with those
I
kind of shows?
for my money, yeah, I think people were more interested in longer form performances
Mhm.
and would be more likely to sit through a 2 or 3 minute performance. And now with TikTok and all that, it's taken on a different um it's a different beast. You know, the content you have to put out it's in smaller bites for the most part. So that aspect of it where things were longer form, I appreciate more as an artist because I like to work in that paradigm. I like full albums rather than singles and that sort, you know.
What would you say your music style is? It doesn't have to be one word, it could be multiple words, but what would you say your style is with music?
Well, I have my debut American release coming out, and I've taken on a certain style with this upcoming music, the stuff I've written since moving to America. So this genre, because I've done quite a few genres, I'd call this genre Americana generally.
Mhm.
There's a lot of there's a folk element. Jim Croce was my role model for this stuff. So the troubadour aspect is there, singer songwriter kind of vibe, acoustic.
Okay. Is
Yeah,
that something that was always in the end result what you wanted? Was that acoustic style? Because that's definitely I mean radios nowadays have like days where it's all acoustic variation.
yeah.
So it seems like that is really coming up because with live performances and news stations, it's always acoustic. Is that something that really was passionate for you?
It is. As I say, there's a lot. There are a lot of genres that interest me. But what interests me now in terms of any given project is looking at it holistically as a more well-rounded artist and saying
Mhm.
to myself, okay, uh, I'm I'm deciding to focus on this particular style. What does that look like? What kind of venues do I play? What kind of festivals? Who am I performing with? And so not only is it fun to imagine how things will unfold musically with any given project, but it's fun to imagine how it will unfold in every other aspect.
Yeah.
So that's been drawing, especially now with my wife's influence, theatrical influence. I think about things in those terms.
What kind of venues do you like to play at?
I like listening rooms a lot
Okay.
for this style of music. I like the sit down, maybe get dinner kind of vibe, or a soft cedar theater where people are sitting down and maybe 2,000 capacity type of a venue. And it's well lit. The sound's incredible. The acoustics are great. I love that. You know, Grand Ole Opry.
It almost because when you talk about like that type of venue, I can already picture it. It's kind of
Yeah,
like a relaxing mood. It's not
yeah,
like you're going to a rock concert and everyone's dancing like it's heavy metal or something. Which
that's right. Yeah,
and then you mentioned the dinner part, which that's always it's untraditional than the classical music you hear. You're kind of
mm,
bringing a different vibe into that setting.
yeah. And you know that setting calls for a lot of storytelling and
Oh yeah.
describing, you know, what the song might be about or what influenced you to write it. And that's an area where I'm a little more apprehensive. I don't take to it as well as I do just performing a song. So I like that challenge as well, where I'm called to be a storyteller when I'm talking to the audience as well as when I'm singing to the audience. So I'm interested in fleshing that out and seeing how that unfolds as I move forward.
When you're writing the lyrics, where are you getting your inspiration from with the story that you're sharing?
Well, the music I started writing after we moved to America I was trying to encapsulate all of the experiences I'd had up until that point, including the birth of my twin boys, marrying my wife, you know, becoming a man in a new sense. And so I was drawing on a lot of those experiences
Mhm.
and trying to do it as poetically as possible.
When people are listening to it, or if they haven't listened to it, do you think it's going to be easy for them to kind of connect to it? Or have you been playing like clips on social media content and people are really connecting to those words that you're talking about?
They are. I've just started to roll out little teasers for the song. So nobody's really heard it in its entirety yet, but it seems to be resonating. I want to keep my descriptions of it or whatever I might say when I put out a teaser or something, uh, broad in the sense that whoever's listening to it can apply to themselves, and
Yeah.
it has a universal appeal because I want people to have that experience listening to it. I want it to be I want it to resonate as much for them as it does for me.
When does the music come out officially?
Well, it's called Eyes My Daddy Gave Me. It's going to be out October 20th. And I got some great people who worked on it. Clarence J produced it, who's done a ton of stuff in the industry. Brandon Bell, who's mixed a lot of great artists. Brandy Carlisle, I think one of the most recent artists. And then some other great musicians as well.
With the release of this in the few weeks at the time of this interview, are you already prepping for that next song? Does that get you excited to continue to write after you know this one's coming out soon?
It does. I've written about 30 songs since we moved here. I whittled them down to 10 or so. I'm pretty ruthless with my own material. So the songs are there, and it's nice to have this one out because I think it serves as a template in terms of the production for the other ones. And now I have more ideas in terms of where those are going to go and how they'll sound. So it's nice. The visions coming into view more and more, and it makes it exciting for me, and it gives me the impetus to move forward.
With music nowadays, it's a lot of competition out there. What makes you feel that you stand out in a certain way, or how are you getting your name out there in this world music industry?
Well, I think the fact that I've done so many things and played in so many, I've lived in so many places, played so many markets, gives me a wealth of experience that is hard to come by. I think it's unique,
Mhm.
and I believe that's reflected in the music that I've written recently. I think it's my best work so far.
You talked about earlier that anytime you find something, you kind of have that peak interest in it. During this time with music, have you found other avenues in that kind of entertainment, artistic area that you've enjoyed doing?
I love theater, and I'm currently working on a musical. I've been
Oh,
writing a lot of material for a musical. It's going to happen in St. Pete, Florida, and then I think with any luck, it'll move outwards from there across the country, and that's really cool because it's been a long time since I've done anything music theater related. I went to an art school in Toronto for music theater, so that was kind of the last time. But that's an area that's a little different than what I typically do. That's definitely interesting to me.
so are these acting roles that you've had that have been involved in with musical theater, and that's kind of the area you focus on?
Well, the music theater piece that I'm working on in Florida just kind of fell together, a series of synchronistic events, and I was able to use my background in the theater along with my wife because she's involved too to manifest it, and so like I say, it's been a long time since I've used certain skills in that way, and so it's a nice new opportunity.
With working with your wife, that's always a huge challenge because maybe differences or agreements. What has been special about this opportunity to work with your wife in all these different projects?
Well, the fact that we're married and best friends and lovers, and that we get to also explore the creative aspect of things is, I think, something that not too many people get to do, and I feel very fortunate in that regard. Yeah.
Is
I
she
also wanted to give a shout out to a guy I'm working with, and is going to be appearing on the Eyes My Daddy Gave Me. He's the second guitar player and backing vocalist. And I met him when we first moved. His name's Devin McPherson. I met him when we first moved to Nashville. And he's a lovely guy, and I'm so glad to have him on board for this. So he'll be working with me on the next few songs as well.
Does that always get you excited to have those other people that you've met and get them involved with your songs?
Yeah, it's cool when you get along with somebody and you have a good vibe together. It's a joy. It's a joy to be able to be creative together.
I just think that's awesome. Like the creative, I think everyone needs to find that creative outlet in a way, because I think they'll shock themselves on what they're able to do when they get that creativity, that artistic. Because I always view myself as that, where I'm not a singer. I can't even sing for my life, but I had that musical talent playing the French horn, but I find creativity in other avenues. I mean, you can just tell by, if you're watching this, you can see with my lights how that's my creative, like coming with like a background. And
It looks real. I love that, by the way.
thank you. It's something special. I mean, anyone that knows me knows I love LED lights, which, I mean, I could take this whole room and make it like a rave party in a way, but I try not to. With storytelling, is there ever a story that you're hoping to reveal in the future or write about? You don't have to reveal what it is, but is it always in the plan in the future of, okay, I really want to talk about this story, but I don't know how to do it yet?
That's an interesting question. Often the vision for something coming to be comes from some kind of a hook line that'll come to me that I think is interesting, and maybe it'll be a pithy way of summarizing something I've experienced. And so, and often that line will just stick with me for a while. It'll just sit with me, and then it'll keep coming up in quiet moments. Eventually, I'm almost forced to do it. Like sometimes I feel like I do things in spite of myself because I'm actually a very lazy person. But the muse pushes me to do it, and I kind of just go, okay, fine. So, like I said, it happens in spite of myself.
You talked about all the things that you're doing. Looking at the personal side, does that ever the professional side play an effect in your personal life where maybe you're overworking yourself, too much stress, don't know what's next for you, having that writer's block? What has been that like for you?
Well, I'm kind of experiencing that right. My wife and I are experiencing that right now because we're working very hard together on this release. And it is hard to balance the sort of anxiety that'll come up or stress, and the fact that we have a personal relationship with the professional side of things. And that's true of others that I work with as well. Things come up, and especially when success starts to happen professionally, it can even more than failure infringe on your private life in negative ways. So I think it's important to always be vigilant, check in with yourself. Take time every morning for silence and a bit of reflection, and make sure you're behaving properly.
When you're not working with music, what does Oliver like to do for fun? What's something that maybe fans of yours maybe don't know?
1 second, what are you saying? Oh, Doc is talking to me from the corner over there. Family life is something that I take a lot of pleasure in. It's wonderful to my kids are going to be 5 in January.
Oh,
so they're right in that cute stage. It's almost severe levels of cuteness, I would describe it. So I love being a dad, and that really, other than I have my shows that I like to watch or whatever, but in terms of my life, that would be my one great diversion and from music that I get a lot of pleasure from.
would you love your kids to be involved in music some way if that's something they're interested in?
Yeah, I have mixed emotions about it, but I mean, if they do want to do that, I'll say, okay, there's going to be some ups and downs. So I hope you can stick it out, but I would love that. Yeah, it would be awesome to see them get into music. But really anything that, I think with kids, you just got to pay attention to what motivates them and what they like and encourage that, whatever it might be. So I'll be just as happy if they do something completely unrelated as long as they love it and they're driven to do it.
That's the way to do it. I mean, because maybe they'll find music organically and like you'll be like,
Mhm.
how did you get involved in that? Or how did you find
Yeah.
that? And then it just starts
Yeah.
that connection.
And it can take any number of forms. They might get into scoring movies. They might get
Yeah.
into music for commercials or doing session work, or they could be rock stars.
The final question I'll ask you for someone that's listening to this interview based on your journey and experience, what tips or advice would you give them to overcome obstacles, accomplish their goals, and rise to the challenge?
Well, scheduling, this is something I've struggled with a lot, but scheduling things properly and every morning setting about what you need to do for the day, in order preferably, and then in any moment that you're allowed a little bit of a break to engage in activities that rejuvenate you. They can be something that's unrelated to whatever work you have to do, um, and just find things that keep you centered, because there's a lot of opportunity to go off the rails and freak out in this line of work. And just remember, it takes a long time. It takes a long time to hone your craft. It takes a lot of patience. Uh, but if you love music or whatever the art form might be enough, that should be enough to sustain you.
Well, Oliver, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show and talking about your rise to the challenge. You're inspiring so many people, and we are excited to see what the future looks like for you.
Oh, I appreciate that. I hope it does inspire people, and it's been a pleasure. Thank you.